Is there any reason to believe? I mean, again, I know that we're getting better at treatment. I know that more people understand what the symptoms are. Testing continues to increase, though not to the levels we'd like. I mean, as all of that happens, how much do you think right now mortality rates legitimately are going down as a consequence of that?
I think they are. I think there's no doubt in my mind, when I have pored over the data, that an average person who got infected and got sick enough to be hospitalized, let's say in March in New York, that person probably has a 30 to 50% lower likelihood of dying today. That's amazing.
That's amazing. In less than a year.
Yeah, in 8 months, 9 months, we've reduced mortality by 30 to 50%. How have we done this? A little bit through therapies. Remdesivir, maybe. Convalescent plasma, probably not. Dexamethasone, a steroid, I think really the evidence is very good that it's clearly helpful for more advanced disease. But also, I think doctors and nurses have just gotten better at figuring out how to take care of people with this disease, whom to put on a ventilator, whom not to, how to avoid putting somebody on a ventilator. Just a lot of stuff because we had no experience with this disease, right? And so we were making a bunch of reasonable guesses based on similar diseases like this. And we've learned how to take care of this specific virus itself.
Do you have any sense on whether or not you think it is likely that over the next 6-9 months we will have continued progress in mortality?
There's at least one more therapy that I remain pretty optimistic about, and that's monoclonal antibodies, the kind that the president got when he was sick, Governor Chris Christie got when he was infected. Again, the data on this is still very much in the works. What I'm most worried about with monoclonal antibodies is that back in April, May, many of us who were optimistic about this were begging the government to make a large investment in production, saying even if it turns out not to be useful, it will have wasted maybe some hundreds of millions or maybe a couple of $1 billion. But if it turns out to be useful, American people will want millions of doses of this. That hasn't happened. So if these therapies turn out to be useful, we just won't have much of it around. And that'll be frustrating to people who could benefit from it. And then there is probably another 30 to 50 drugs that are being tried out. Most of them won't work, but if one or two of them do, that could make a big difference. So I remain optimistic that a year from now, this disease will be even more treatable than it is today.
Okay, so that's good news on the mortality rate front. What about in terms of extended implications of people that get this disease, the so-called long COVID?
But there are two groups of people that I think about in terms of people with longer-term consequences. One is people who were really pretty severely injured during that initial hospitalization or that initial illness. So I have a colleague who's in his mid-40s, a physician, used to run marathons, and he got COVID in April. He can barely walk down the block without getting short of breath. He has very profound lung damage. Will he recover a year or 2 years from that? We just don't know. We don't know how much of his pulmonary function will recover. So you have those kinds of people, and they may represent 5-10% of people who get infected, maybe let's say closer to 5%.
5% of all people that get infected. In other words, we're talking asymptomatic everything.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, part of it is it depends on how many people get hospitalized, but most people who get hospitalized when they come out end up with some level of disability. It may very well be that 6 months later, many of them will have recovered a lot of their function. We just don't know. But again, some of the series from China, from other places suggest that 60-70% of people who've been hospitalized 6 months later are still suffering significant consequences. So it could be, let's say, 5% of potentially everybody. The second group, which is I think a much smaller group, are people who continue to have active symptoms, fevers and other things, 1, 2, 3, even 5 months out. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen to any of these people because we just don't have that long a set of experiences. Again, those are relatively infrequent, but we've got to watch them. And I don't know that we're getting any better at either predicting who's going to have it or doing anything to help those people yet. We don't have enough experience with those types.